Okay. So, heir of the blue necked, thy will prevail, akin tusked script of Vyasa's tale. Bestow me words for Bhattadri's plea, thy trunk uncoiled, ills be I free. I just recited the invocation from the book, Bhattadri's Narayanwwyam in English verse, created by my personal god, Krishna, that I typed into the computer. I say that not with humility, neither do I say that with the arrogance that Lord Krishna sat next to me, like he sat next to, Vyasa, as he dictated the book and I wrote it down, although I really wish that were true. I say that for another reason, which I shall tell you shortly. Good morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where you are. Thank you for having me here. I especially thank Rajesh for giving me this opportunity to share my experience of the Narayanwwyam. Now, Rajesh introduced me as a writer. Let me reintroduce myself, not as a writer, but as a fighter. At the moment, I am like Arjuna, seated on my chariot, driven by Lord Krishna and shooting arrows of chemotherapy against cancer cells in my body. Yes, I'm a cancer survivor, still fighting the battle, which I'm sure I will win because I have Krishna leading me in this battle. My journey of the Narayanwwyam goes back to January of 2023. My college-going daughter, for the first time, left home to attend a semester abroad program in the UK. From about the time she left, my stomach was bunched up. I was having a lot of issues with my gut. And I thought it was because I was missing my daughter and worrying about her safety. By March, the problems were getting more and more severe. But I had stopped getting my periods around this time, so I attributed all my pain and discomfort to the dreaded menopause. By May, I couldn't even eat anything because of my gut issues. Now I love food. I am the kind that lives to eat and not eats to live. In the trio of yogi, bhogi, and rogi, I am the bhogi, bordering on rogi. So not being able to eat was very disturbing to me. Like an idiot, I still didn't go to the doctor, because I attributed this problem to, stuff like stress, IBS, menopause, what you will. But I knew that I had to have a little understanding with my personal god, Krishna. Now, why Krishna? Let me pause here and go back further into my life history. You'd think I'm like one of the spiritual kinds, that found Krishna the way Meera did. When I tell you why Krishna became my personal god, you will probably stop listening to my talk any further. I'll take that risk. I wonder if you remember that in the 80s, there was a show called the Mahabharat that was aired in the Doordarshan. It was a custom in my house to watch this show every week. I was around 16 years old at that time. Now, around that time, the hormones were raging. I had a huge crush on one of the actors in the show, Nitesh Bharadwaj. He acted as Krishna. So I fell in love with Krishna because I had a crush on Nitesh Bharadwaj. Long after I got over the crush with the actor, my love for Krishna remained. Now, let me clarify. My love for Krishna was not the selfless kind of the Gopikas. My love was transactional. I called him only when I was in some kind of trouble or pain, never when things were going smoothly. And like Shishupala, I must have called Krishna a gazillion names that don't fall under the Sahasranamam. Last May, I was in pain and I called out to my Krishna. I made a pact with him. Since Navaratri was coming, I would hand make dolls for the Golu depicting scenes from the Bhagavatam where Krishna is associated with food. And in return, he has to fix my problem. So I went through innumerable YouTube tutorials on how to make dolls. I made dolls from Barbie dolls for 5 scenes involving Krishna and food. Baby Krishna eating butter, baby Krishna eating mud, baby Krishna drinking milk from Pudanai, Krishna and Sudama, and Krishna and Draupadi's Akshaya Patra. Navaratri neared. I was nowhere to feeling better. In fact, I was feeling worse. Still, on the new moon that kicks off Navaratri, the Malaya Amavasya, I built the steps and placed my handmade dolls on them. When the last doll was placed, I really needed to use the toilet. I rushed to the toilet, and when I looked down, the toilet bowl was filled with blood. My husband rushed me to the hospital, and the colonoscopy showed that there was a large tumor that was blocking my gut, and the tumor looked very angry and carcinogenic. The PET showed that I was in fourth stage, and surgery and intensive chemotherapy was required. I remember I broke down when the oncologist told me this. As I sobbed, I could only cry out, Krishna, Krishna. Once I calmed down, I walked up to my puja room, looked at the picture of Guruvayurappan that I had there and said, you are the boss. You do what you will. I don't have the energy nor strength to even think about this. By the end of October, the surgery was done. A month later, I started my chemo. On the first chemo session, my sister was there with me, my sister Chitra, who's there in this group today, and the one who has actually saved me was there. I had a dream. I'd like to call it a vision. Guruvayurappan stood in front of me wearing nothing but a red loincloth, laughing mischievously and calling me Akka or big sister. He then morphed into Parthasarathi of the temple in my hometown of Taplikan. I woke up wondering if there was a message in this for me or it was just a drug-added dream or wishful thinking. Anyway, by this time, a lot of people had asked me to chant this shloka from the Narayanwwyam, Asmin Paratman Nanupadma Kalpe, Tvamita Mukta Pitapadma Yonihi, Ananta Bhuma Mamaroga Rasim, Nirinti Vatalaya Vasa Vishnu. This is supposed to cure all illnesses, especially cancer, and I had been chanting this. I had read the Tamil version of the Narayanwwyam when I was younger, during my Nitesh Bharadwaj crush era, and I wanted to revisit this book. I borrowed the book from my father and tried to read it. My brother-in-law also gave me an online version of the book, which I also tried to read. Somehow I could not focus. I kept reading and reading the verses, but none of it would register. Then I realized why. I had been a writer for so long that the only way that my brain would engage in anything was when I was writing. So one night after dinner, before I went to bed, I decided to write. So after reading the original in Sanskrit, I know a smattering of Sanskrit, and the Tamil translation, I wrote each slokam in English. Now this is where the miracle happened. As I started typing out the English translation, it came out as poetry, not as prose. I have never written poetry in my life. I have not even tried. I can write reams and reams of prose of any kind, but poetry always evaded me. But here I was, writing poetry that I wasn't even consciously creating. They just flowed. In 1 hour, the first dasakam was done, and I felt like I had been through a hurricane. I couldn't sit, I couldn't think. I was exhausted beyond imagination, not physical exhaustion, mind you, mental exhaustion. I just crawled to bed and literally passed out. The next day, my computer called me after dinner again, and I sat, and the second dashakam flowed out in poetry from my head. Since then, every night that I was not in hospital undergoing chemo, I typed out one dasakam. I say typed out and not wrote because I don't remember consciously creating these verses. They just happened. Later, when I went back and read these verses, I couldn't for the life of me remember writing them. I certainly think this is some kind of a miracle. When I told this to one of my friends, a very ardent devotee of the Lord, she said, Krishna wanted to hear his tales in English, and he wrote it himself through you. I feel incredibly humbled at this thought. Here is the best part. I completed typing out the 100th dasakam the week of the last chemotherapy. After that chemotherapy, I went for a PET scan that showed me clean. I had gone from 4th stage cancer to no cancer in 6 months of writing the Narayanwwyam. Yes, I am still on maintenance chemo to prevent stuff from coming back. I am also still on maintenance Asmin Paratman to prevent stuff from coming back. 2 weeks back, my best friend Lalita, and a true blue Malayali, and her Mallu sisters took me to Guruvayur, where I was fortunate enough to dedicate a print copy of the Narayanwwyam to Guruvayurappan. It was the most moving experience I've had in a while. After I left the book on the bench before the Lord, I broke down and cried, God knows why. Perhaps it was Thanksgiving, or perhaps it was my way of yelling at Lord Krishna for putting me through crap only because he wanted to see the Narayanwwyam in English verse. Remember, I said my love for Krishna used to be transactional? It still is. But here is my take. My father, Mr. Gopal, now 82, has always been my spiritual guru. When I was young, my father would tell me tales from the Hindu mythology. There's one thing he said that struck me. No matter how you think of the Lord, you will reach him, he said. Kamsa thought of him in fear, and he reached him. Shishupala gave him 1,000 galis in hatred, and he reached him. The Gopikas called out to his name in love, and they reached him. Bhishma gave him 1,000 names in Sahasranamam and reached him. Even the false Vasudeva, who considered himself Krishna, became one of him. So I figure even my transactional calling to him will help take me one step towards the Lord. My findings from the past 1 year's journey of Narayanwwyam can be summarized in 2 points. Courage is the only manifestation of God in these times. Some may call it surrendering to God. I call it courage to surrender to what is happening, which is God's will. This does not mean giving up on your activities. One advice I received after my diagnosis was just surrender to God. Forget the doctors and treatment. Only God can cure you. That reminded me of this in Harry Potter. Tell me one last thing, said Harry. Is this real, or has this been happening inside my head? Dumbledore beamed at him, and his voice sounded loud and strong in Harry's ears, even though the bright mist was descending again, obscuring his figure. Of course it's happening inside your head, Harry, but why on earth should that mean it's not real? Yes, I surrendered to Lord Krishna. But why is chemotherapy and the doctor not Krishna's way of saving me? But coming to the point, courage is the manifestation of Lord Krishna. The second takeaway is one of those inspirational points like you find in self-help books. That book you want to write, that song you want to sing, the dance you want to perform, there's never another good time than now. Remember the story of Parikshit, who was cursed to die in 7 days. When he complained about this, he was told, you are lucky. You know that you have 7 days to live. Most of us don't even have that luxury. Without that realization, the epic of Srimad Bhagavatam would never have come into the open. That is the truth. Write that book, sing that song, dance that dance, no matter what others say, no matter how bad you feel your book has come out, no matter how off-key your voice is. I wish I had tried my hand at poetry much earlier. Still, better late than never. I have many people to thank for my journey of this past year. First, of course, is Chitra. Without Chitra, my cousin, I could not have faced this. And I think Chitra was the emissary of Lord Krishna to me. My father, my family, my husband and my daughter, my cousins, my innumerable number of friends, all of them have been inspiration to me in this past year and have given me enough strength to face this and the spirituality to seek Lord Krishna. Of course, I am an insignificant dust to even think of thanking the Omnipresent. So I conclude with dedicating everything to Krishna. Kayena vacha manasendriyeva dhyatmanabha prakrite swabhava karomi yatyat sakalam parasmi narayanayeti samarpayami. Sarvam Sri Krishnarpanamastu. So thank you. That would be my presentation. And I am open to any questions or discussion.